The story begins within the opulent, chandelier-lit expanse of a grand ballroom. Lady Lisha Blanche commands the center of attention, her posture radiating a calculated arrogance that silences the murmuring crowd. Dressed in an elaborate, off-the-shoulder gown adorned with dark lace and clutching a fan of black feathers, she confronts a tall, dark-haired man in a military uniform, Lord Allen. With a piercing gaze and a mocking smile, she addresses her fiancé, noting that it has been a significant amount of time since they last stood face to face. She questions his audacity in showing his face before her, the fiancé he had ostensibly ignored for 10 long years. Her words drip with practiced disdain as she demands to know his business, setting a stage of high tension and apparent animosity. To understand this confrontation, the narrative rewinds a month prior to the Royal Palace Ceremony Hall. In the privacy of the preparation rooms, Lisha rehearses her venomous lines, practicing the rejection of a useless man who comes to sweet-talk her too late. She solidifies her resolve to be the one doing the dumping, framing herself as the architect of their separation. The scene shifts to the grandeur of the coming-of-age ceremony, a pivotal tradition in the kingdom. A solemn official calls Lisha Blanche's name, instructing her to step forward before the deity to receive the sacred wine. Lisha, looking the picture of a perfect noble daughter in a modest, frilled dress, responds dutifully to her father. Onlookers whisper in admiration of her beauty, her prestigious family status as the daughter of a marquis, and her engagement to the captain of the royal guard. They note her perfection, unaware of the turmoil about to unfold. The ceremony dictates that upon turning 18, a noble is recognized as an adult and eligible for marriage only after consuming the sacred wine. Lisha approaches the ornate chalice, trembling slightly as she acknowledges this as her first experience with alcohol, forbidden until this very day. She lifts the cup and takes a sip, the liquid passing her lips with a heavy gulp. The taste of alcohol registers for a split second before darkness claims her consciousness. The hall erupts into chaos as she collapses, her body hitting the floor while panic spreads among the attendees and calls for a doctor ring out. Lisha awakens later in her bed, surrounded by the concerned murmurs of her family and attendants. They speculate that she merely needs rest, noting that physically, nothing appears wrong with her. However, as Lisha gazes into a hand mirror, analyzing her blue-green eyes and golden hair, a profound realization strikes her. She recites her name, Lisha Blanche, and identifies her fiancé as the captain of the royal guard. The pieces of a fragmented reality snap together. She is the only daughter of a marquis, but more importantly, she recognizes the world she inhabits. Memories from a past life flood her mind. She recalls being a young woman in modern Japan who had just graduated college and secured a job despite a chronic illness, only to collapse and die. During her hospitalization, she had obsessively played a shop management otome game titled Heart-Pounding Life'em. The realization hits her with the force of a physical blow. She has been reincarnated into that very game. However, fate has dealt her a cruel hand. She is not the heroine, but Lisha Blanche, the villainess destined to obstruct the protagonist. A sudden voice interrupts her internal panic. A small, round bird, a Java sparrow, perches on her bedspread and speaks, identifying itself as the navigator tasked with saving players from a game over. The bird, displaying a digital continue interface, informs her that because she has regained her memories during the ceremony, she must now fulfill her role as the villainess. The bird warns of bugs in this world, currently minor glitches that will eventually escalate into a catastrophic disaster if the game's narrative is not preserved. Skeptical of the bird's claims, Lisha questions the severity of the situation. The bird, annoyed by her disbelief, projects a terrifying vision of the future, the bad ending where the kingdom of Kyo is completely wiped out. Lisha watches in horror as the vision displays a kingdom consumed by civil war, its diplomatic relations with neighboring countries crumbling into dust. She sees her mother and father taken prisoner, stripped of their dignity. Most heart-wrenching of all, she sees Lord Allen, the captain of the royal guard, and her fiancé, caught in the devastation. The bird emphasizes that this total destruction is the game's solitary, bad ending, an inevitable outcome if she fails to play her part. Steeling herself against the horrifying prophecy, Lisha accepts the burden. If playing the villainess is the price to save her family, the kingdom, and her beloved favorite character, Lord Allen, she resolves to become the greatest villainess the world has ever seen. She vows to give it her very best, her determination burning bright as the bird nods in approval, acknowledging her spirit. The narrative jumps forward to the practical application of her new resolve. Lisha undergoes a rigorous, villainous boot camp under the tutelage of the Java Sparrow. The bird criticizes her naturally kind tone, forcing her to memorize a manual on villainous behavior. Lisha, flustered but obedient, accepts the correction, though she snaps back when the bird pecks at her. The training culminates at a social gathering, marking Lisha's debut in her new persona. She arrives at the party, her presence immediately drawing eyes and whispered criticisms about her flashy, less elegant appearance compared to her former self. A persistent suitor, disparagingly nicknamed Frog by onlookers, approaches her with a bouquet of cheap flowers, attempting to propose despite her engagement. He ignores social boundaries, suggesting she accept his roses and stay by his side. Lisha seizes this moment. Channeling her training, she unleashes a torrent of haughty insults. She tells him to look in the mirror and know his place, scoffing at the idea that he and his cheap flower are a match for her high status. She snaps her fan shut, her eyes cold, embodying the cruel aristocrat. However, her cruelty has a hidden purpose. She spots a young woman named Karina nearby, a commoner girl whom Lisha identifies as the flower that truly suits Frog. With a dramatic flourish, Lisha declares that dull little flowers should go with dull little flowers, physically pushing Frog toward Karina. This act, publicly humiliating Frog, inadvertently pushes him into the arms of the woman who has been by his side all along. Frog realizes his affection for Karina, and the crowd interprets the scene as Lisha being heartless, while simultaneously noting that Frog and Karina are perfect for each other. The bird, watching from a hidden vantage point, marks the event as a success. Frog and Karina are support characters meant to help the heroine, and Lisha has successfully facilitated their engagement. Lisha retreats, coughing from the strain of her performance, while the bird praises her insults. The gossip mill churns. People whisper that Lisha has become a completely different person and that Lord Alan would be crushed if he saw her like this. The bird refocuses Lisha on the ultimate objective. Lord Alan is returning soon. Breaking off the engagement with him is a mandatory event in the game's storyline to avoid the bad ending. The bird instructs her that a smooth breakup is key. She must ensure Alan genuinely hates her. Lisha, despite her internal affection for him, prepares to sever ties for his own protection. Meanwhile, in a far-off foreign land, the narrative reveals the perspective of the men returning home. Prince Cyrus of Kio, having spent 10 years training abroad in the kingdom of Kanchiana, complains about his schedule. He pleads for just 1 day of sightseeing before returning, but he is sternly denied by his bodyguard, Captain Alan Corks. Alan, stoic and disciplined in his military uniform, insists they return immediately for the upcoming parade. Cyrus teases Alan, suggesting that he is rushing back because of his fiancée, Lisha, though Cyrus cynically remarks she has likely forgotten him after a decade. Alan fiercely defends Lisha, asserting she is not that kind of woman. A flashback reveals their parting 10 years ago. A young Alan had offered to release Lisha from the engagement, fearing the long wait would be too much for her. However, a young, tearful Lisha had refused, grasping his hand and promising to wait and work hard to become a lady worthy of him. Holding on to this memory, Alan is determined to return. Cyrus, seeing his captain's devotion, relents and orders immediate preparations for their return, granting Alan the win. Alan bows, thanking the prince, his usual stoicism cracking slightly to reveal his eagerness to see Lisha. Back at the capital, the welcome party for Prince Cyrus begins. The king proudly introduces his son, who has returned after many years. Lisha stands in the crowd, fidgeting nervously. The bird scolds her for her restlessness, reminding her that this is the big day. Lisha admits to the excitement of seeing the game events unfold in real life. In the original game, the prince is already back when the story starts, but now she is witnessing the prologue. The doors open, and Prince Cyrus enters, waving to the adoring crowd. Behind him stands the main event for Lisha, Lord Alan. He looks imposing, scanning the room with intense eyes. Lisha's heart races as she lays eyes on him. She recalls her knowledge of his character arc, how he is dutiful, quiet, and initially cold, but slowly opens up over time. The bird reminds her of the plan. Alan is supposed to come say hello after his guarding duties. That is the moment she must strike with the villainous Lisha performance. Their rocky relationship and eventual breakup are fundamental premises of the game. Lisha steels herself to make him hate her, viewing it as a necessary sacrifice for the kingdom and for him. However, the plan goes awry immediately. Alan approaches her early, breaking protocol before the party is even over. Lisha panics, mentally screaming that this wasn't supposed to happen yet. Alan stares at her intensely. Lisha freezes, her mind going blank. The bird, hiding in the shadows, or perhaps on her person, frantically prompts her to say her lines and not just stand there. Forced into action, Lisha adopts her villainous persona. She raises her fan and unleashes the rehearsed script. She calls him useless, claims he is too late to sweet-talk her, and declares that she is the one dumping him. She questions what he could possibly want with the fiancé he ignored for 10 years, her voice dripping with artificial venom. She braces herself for his anger, for the hatred that will save the world from the bad ending where the country falls. But Alan does not recoil. He does not yell. Instead, he steps forward and wraps his arms around her in a tight, desperate embrace. He buries his face in her shoulder, shattering her villainous facade with 3 simple words, "I missed you." The carefully constructed narrative of the villainess crumbles instantly against the reality of his enduring affection. The ballroom's atmosphere, previously thick with the tension of a lover's reunion, shatters instantly as Lisha Blanche violently recoils from Lord Alan's embrace. Internal alarms blare within her mind, questioning why he breaks the script so brazenly. She steels her resolve, reminding herself that her sole purpose in this venue is to manufacture hatred, not romance. The Java Sparrow, her frantic navigator, screeches a warning to cease her panic, prompting Lisha to physically shove the captain of the Royal Guard away. She sneers, her face contorted into a mask of disdain, and demands he cease his friendly demeanor immediately. Confusion ripples through the bystanders as she loudly questions the situation, while Alan stands stunned, his arms now empty. Lisha, sweating nervously despite her cold exterior, doubles down on her performance. She leans in, her eyes narrowing into slits of contempt, and asks if he genuinely believes he is still her fiancé. Alan's stoic expression cracks, his eyes widening in sheer disbelief as he demands clarification. She declares with icy precision that her presence is solely to celebrate His Highness, the Prince, and that she possesses no connection to Alan whatsoever. The rejection escalates into a public flaying of his dignity. Lisha scoffs, asking if he truly believed she would squander her time waiting for someone of his caliber. She belittles him, calling him a child and suggesting it is long past time he overcame his self-importance. The harshness of her words strikes Alan with physical force, causing him to whisper her name in a daze, questioning if this cold woman is truly the Lisha he remembers. With a dramatic flourish of her gown, Lisha turns her back on him, signaling the end of the conversation. She dismisses his confusion with a wave of her hand, feigning ignorance of his words, and imperiously commands a nearby servant to bring her carriage around. Leaving Alan standing amidst the murmuring crowd, she excuses herself with a final, cutting remark. The guests whisper furiously, their gaze darting between the stunned captain and the departing noblewoman. Lisha maintains her regal posture until the heavy doors of the estate slam shut behind her. The moment she enters the privacy of the corridor, her facade disintegrates. She slumps, her knees trembling beneath her voluminous dress. The bird, perched on her shoulder, sighs, noting that Alan has not changed in the slightest. Lisha, breathless, wonders what the meaning of his affectionate outburst was, trying to convince herself that she achieved her goal of alienation. The bird analyzes the situation, admitting it had calculated that Alan would have moved on after a decade of silence, yet he remains steadfast. Lisha defends herself, flushing with embarrassment, insisting she did nothing to encourage such behavior. The bird mocks her flustered state, pointing out that she must have had him wrapped around her finger since childhood to command such loyalty. Lisha's mind drifts to a memory of her 8-year-old self, realizing that this is her first encounter with him since regaining her past life memories. She confesses she never anticipated he would act with such open affection. Overwhelmed with guilt, she buries her face in her gloved hands, silently apologizing to Lord Alan for the cruelty she just inflicted. The bird, ever the pragmatist, reassures her that she performed well and undoubtedly destroyed his romantic feelings. It advises patience to see the results. Lisha wipes her eyes, steeling herself again. She rationalizes that breaking the engagement without trouble requires this level of severity, though a part of her mourns the realization that he cared for her so deeply. The narrative shifts to the Royal Guard headquarters. Alan sits at his desk, his face a portrait of brooding intensity. His subordinates welcome him back, hesitantly asking about the party, but they recoil at his aura of suppressed rage. Alan acknowledges internally that the woman he met was indeed Lisha Blanche physically, yet she bore no resemblance to the person in his memories. He interrogates his men, demanding to know what transpired during his 10-year absence. his mind replays the promise she made as a child, to wait for him. He refuses to accept that her childhood vow was a lie. His subordinates present their findings, confirming they gathered every detail as requested. They report a consistent narrative from all sources. For years, Lisha was perfectly normal. However, a drastic shift occurred immediately following her coming-of-age ceremony. From that day forward, she began acting strange, with even her parents expressing deep worry that the sweet girl she once was had vanished. Alan absorbs this information, his sharp eyes narrowing. He deduces that the priest who presided over the ceremony must hold the key. His subordinate asks if they should visit the temple immediately, but Alan stands, his cape swirling around him. He declines the escort, declaring he will handle this matter personally. Meanwhile, Lisha fully embraces her villainous role in high society. A montage reveals her ruthless rejection of various suitors. She laughs haughtily, the signature "oh ho ho" of a true villainess, as she crushes the hopes of a man seeking a promotion, telling him she has no interest in mediocrity. She mocks another proposal, laughing in his face. Bystanders watch in awe and horror, confirming the rumors of her transformation are true, though some admit they strangely look up to her new, fierce persona. The rejections continue. She dismisses men by telling them there are better women elsewhere, her fan hiding her face as she executes one social execution after another. Finally, alone in a quiet corridor, she sighs heavily. The facade is exhausting. While she feels she is getting used to the cruelty, she questions if that is a victory worth celebrating. The bird offers no sympathy, attributing her exhaustion to her popularity and beauty. It asks for a body count of rejected suitors. Lisha admits she stopped counting halfway through the day, reminding herself that this fatigue is a small price to pay for the kingdom's future. Being a villainess is rough work. The bird suddenly scolds her for her carelessness in standing alone without an escort. Before she can react, a voice cuts through the air. "My fiancé, my beloved." "Good afternoon," Lord Alan says, appearing behind her with a smile that doesn't quite reach his analytical eyes. Lisha freezes, sweat beading on her forehead as she returns the greeting robotically. Alan steps closer, challenging her previous behavior. Lisha attempts to raise her defenses, claiming she does not say things she doesn't mean. Alan counters, asking how she can deliver such cheesy lines with a straight face. Flustered, Lisha invents an excuse, shouting that she only rejected the previous suitor to make him give up. She realizes logic isn't working on this stubborn bastard, and decides to initiate Plan B. Alan corners her, using her own logic against her. He points out that since she rejected others for lack of status, he, as captain of the knights, is exactly her type. Lisha realizes with horror that he overheard her earlier rejections. The bird whispers that the current strategy is failing. Lisha executes Plan B, the clingy, over-the-top seductress. She throws herself at him, clinging to his arm and pressing close, hoping to humiliate him into repulsion. She adopts a sickly sweet tone, cooing about how he just can't give up on her. Internally, she screams in embarrassment, hating this tactic, while the bird sarcastically calls it cute. She presses her chest against his arm, thinking that if she pushes his boundaries, it will work. She is certain his feelings must be fading due to this undignified display. Alan's expression remains unreadable until he firmly commands her to let go. Lisha mentally celebrates, believing she has found his breaking point. He is not the type to enjoy public displays of affection. But Alan does not push her away in disgust. He simply says her name, Lisha. He begins to recount his actions following the day she collapsed. He reveals he visited the priest to understand what happened. Then, he drops the facade entirely. He looks her dead in the eye and asks, "How about you quit pretending to be a villainess?" Lisha freezes. Alan explains his source, a man who was arrested for murder on the day of the ceremony. This man, while being interrogated, spoke of Lisha not as a villain, but as a goddess. The man had been prepared for the worst, but Lisha had intervened. Alan recounts the testimony he heard. The man described how Lisha stormed in to save him. She had argued furiously with the authorities, demanding how they could charge him with murder when the supposed victim was standing right there, alive and well. She called the situation ridiculous and secured his release immediately. Alan steps closer to the trembling Lisha. He describes how passionately she defended a stranger. The man she saved had declared emphatically, "That lady's no villainess. She's got her reasons." Lisha is paralyzed with panic. Her cover is blown. Alan sighs, admitting he already knew something was wrong with her behavior. He looks at her with determined, possessive eyes. He admits he doesn't know what she is thinking, but he vows to uncover the truth. He declares his intention to get his beloved fiancée back to normal. As Alan walks away, leaving Lisha stunned, the bird spirals into a panic. It realizes the gravity of the situation. As long as the captain of the Royal Guard refuses to give up on Lisha, the game's script is broken. The bird screeches that they are headed straight for disaster, confirming that Alan's love is the catalyst for the potential end of the world. A heavy, suffocating tension hangs in the air between the two figures, the physical proximity betraying an intimacy that the woman, Lisha, seems desperate to escape. Alan Corks, a man of sharp features and piercing eyes, holds her close, his gaze intense and unyielding as he utters her name with a gravity that freezes her in place. Lisha's face flushes, her eyes wide with a mixture of panic and reluctance, her hand clutching the fabric of her dress near her chest as if to guard her heart from the man looming over her. A voice, seemingly internal yet echoing the stakes of her reality, warns that a failure to commit to her role will bring ruin upon the country itself, forcing her to steel her nerves against the magnetic pull of her fiancé. Breaking the spell with a violent surge of motion, Lisha shoves against Alan's chest, her desperation manifesting as a loud, frantic command for him to release her. She raises her voice to a shrill pitch, weaponizing the public space around them by branding him a kidnapper and a pervert, hoping the accusations will shatter the atmosphere of romance he attempts to construct. She screams for help, her head turning to scan the surroundings, inviting the eyes of onlookers to witness the alleged assault. The commotion instantly draws attention, bystanders murmuring and questioning the source of the scream, their gazes shifting toward the spectacle. Seizing the momentum, Lisha points an accusing finger at the growing crowd, shouting that people are starting to stare, using their attention as a shield. She berates him, demanding that if he has the nerve to manhandle her, he should first learn the proper etiquette for treating a lady, feigning ignorance of his confusion regarding her villainous act. She denies any knowledge of the role she is playing, firmly rejecting his inquiries while creating a chaotic diversion to facilitate her escape. With a sharp excuse, Lisha turns on her heel and bolts, the sounds of her rapid footsteps echoing against the stone pillars of the grand architecture as she flees the scene. She scrambles into a waiting carriage, the vehicle rattling as it departs, leaving Alan standing alone in the fading light. He watches her retreat, his expression not one of defeat, but of a complicated, brooding contemplation, murmuring to himself that he never anticipated the situation would spiral to such an extent. Safely away from his immediate presence, Lisha's facade cracks, replaced by a storm of internal confusion and strategic analysis. She reels from the realization that Alan saw through her performance instantly, yet instead of recoiling in disgust, his obsession with her seems to have only deepened. She sighs heavily, the logic of her world crumbling before her eyes. In the original game, their engagement was strictly political, devoid of genuine emotion. She questions why his affection gauge registers at such ridiculously high levels, noting that even if the original Lisha of this world harbored feelings for him, there is no logical reason for him to reciprocate with such intensity. A black bird perches on her shoulder, acting as a confidant or perhaps a manifestation of the plot's mechanics, as Lisha learns of a party scheduled for the following week to celebrate Alan's return. A dark resolve hardens her features. She dismisses the idea of a peaceful resolution, deciding instead to orchestrate a catastrophic scene in front of his relatives. She ignores the bird's query about fault, focusing entirely on utilizing the upcoming event as a public stage to irrevocably ruin her own image. Lisha rationalizes that Alan's awareness of her act is irrelevant at this juncture. She must force him to perceive her as a true villainess, crushing his affection if it proves too resilient. She acknowledges the impossibility of quitting her role, steeling herself for the cruelty she must inflict, despite a flicker of guilt for Lord Alan. The night of the party arrives, the ballroom grand and opulent, filled with the murmurs of high society. Guests gossip openly about Lisha, whispering that she plays with men and discards them like toys, their sympathy directed entirely toward the returning hero, Lord Alan. They lament his misfortune, returning safely from a mission only to be welcomed by a fiancé of such ill repute, their whispers confirming that her true nature has finally surfaced. Lisha enters the fray, sensing the palpable drop in her reputation as the whispers hiss around her like snakes. She clings to the arm of another man, a deliberate provocation, her smile sharp and predatory as she relishes the attention. She decides that this is the moment to make him completely sick of her, parading her infidelity before the entire assembly. However, her grand entrance is interrupted by a familiar, calm voice noting her early arrival. Lisha stiffens, reminding herself that any faltering will allow him to pounce, and forces herself to remain confident as Alan approaches. He greets her formally, his gaze shifting to the man whose arm she holds. Alan's presence is imposing, and the man beside Lisha sweats nervously as Alan demands an explanation, pointing out that the celebration is for him and his parents, yet she arrives with another. The tension in the room spikes as Alan remarks that her behavior reflects poorly on the knightly order as a whole. Lisha's companion apologizes profusely, absolving Alan of fault, but Lisha doubles down on her offensive. She challenges Alan, sneering that if she were truly his fiancée, he should be capable of keeping her in line, effectively blaming him for her indiscretion. Alan accepts this barb with a stoic resignation, prompting Lisha to twist the knife further. She turns to the crowd, loudly questioning why she would remain loyal to someone so cold and distant, citing his sullen attitude as justification for her actions. She believes this is her chance to sever the tie permanently. To her shock, Alan does not explode in anger. Instead, he bows his head in apology. He accepts the fault entirely, declaring that the blame lies with him for leaving such a beautiful lady alone for so long. He announces a new resolve. From this moment on, he will personally escort her to every event, effectively trapping her under his constant supervision. Lisha realizes with horror that he is seizing control of the conversation, turning her attack into a narrative of his own redemption. She recoils physically, snapping at him not to touch her so casually, the crowd whispering furiously at her disrespect toward the guest of honor. She hisses that being her fiancé gives him no right to control her life, asserting her independence and capability to attend parties alone. The onlookers gasp, their perceptions shifting not to condemnation of her, but to shock at her audacity. Alan, undeterred, gazes at her with soft, mournful eyes, interpreting her venom as a symptom of deep emotional pain. He assures her she no longer needs to endure the solitude, promising to stay by her side forevermore. The crowd, swayed by his romantic interpretation, begins to coo that Lisha's outbursts are merely love in disguise, a result of the strain placed on their engagement by 10 years of separation. Alan wipes a tear from her eye, or perhaps simply touches her face, begging her not to be angry and acknowledging the terrible loneliness she must have felt while he was gone. Panic sets in for Lisha as 3 young women approach, Alan's relatives. In the narrative of the game, these characters served as obstacles and nuisances to the heroine, and Lisha prays they will fulfill that role now, intervening to separate her from Alan. She desperately wants someone, anyone, to get between them. The women look at her with wide eyes, tears streaming down their faces, crying out that the awful rumors they heard sound nothing like the Lisha they know. Instead of attacking her, the relatives rush forward with wails of affection, clinging to Lisha and demanding to know what is wrong. Lisha stands frozen, overwhelmed by their embrace, recalling that during the 10 years of Alan's absence, she had occasionally shared tea with them, inadvertently causing them to grow attached to her. The obstacles have transformed into allies, sobbing and begging her to share her burdens. The relatives turn their collective ire upon Alan, scolding him for pressuring Lisha. They declare him the one at fault, pointing out that he left her alone without so much as a letter, creating a vacuum of loneliness that caused her to act strangely. Alan attempts to defend himself, citing military custom and Lisha's prior agreement to the lack of contact during his escort duty, but his explanations fall on deaf ears. The women insist that his neglect is unforgivable. Lisha, suffocating under the weight of this misinterpreted narrative, finally snaps. She declares that the time apart made one thing very clear: being engaged to the captain of the knights is nothing but suffering. She rejects the loneliness excuse with venom, warning them not to dare joke about her feelings or use them as a crutch for his behavior. Before she can escalate further, Alan swoops in, lifting her off her feet in a sudden, decisive motion. Lisha protests, exasperated that he is doing this again, while the relatives, misreading the abduction as a romantic gesture, encourage them to talk things through. They enthusiastically agree to cover for the couple, urging Alan to take her away, effectively sealing Lisha's fate as Alan carries her out of the ballroom. In the quiet of the hallway, Alan continues to carry her, his stride purposeful. He tells her calmly that she can scream all she wants, but no one is coming to save her. Lisha struggles, demanding he let her go, while her mind races to reconcile the man holding her with his character profile, Alan Corks, a character defined by duty, severity, and an iron mask persona. She fumes internally, noting that he was supposed to be a rigid character who slowly opens his heart to the heroine, revealing awkward smiles and confusion over love. Instead, the reality is a man who shamelessly drags a woman into his bedroom without consent. Alan cuts through her thoughts, stating that playing tough with him is pointless, reminding her of her own past exploits, such as dousing a man with wine in public. He deposits her in a private room, the door shutting out the world. The atmosphere shifts to one of heavy, impending confrontation. Alan demands to know what happened, his patience wearing thin. Leisha turns away, maintaining her cold facade, stating she has nothing to say to someone who is only her fiancé, dismissing his right to her inner thoughts. Alan's expression darkens with resolve. He declares that if words fail, they will seal their bond here and now, implying a physical consummation to bridge the emotional chasm, to which he adds a final, decisive affirmation of his intent. Alan Quarks looms over Leisha, his body pressing her down onto the soft surface beneath them, effectively pinning her in place. He utters her name with a heavy, breathless intensity, his hand cradling her cheek while the other cages her against the bed. Leisha stammers, her face flushed with a mixture of panic and confusion as she questions the sanity of the situation, demanding to know how he can be this obsessed with a woman he has not laid eyes on in 10 years. She cries out in disbelief, struggling against his overwhelming presence, unable to reconcile the man before her with the cold narrative she remembers. The scene dissolves into the sepia tones of memory, transporting the narrative back to the inception of their arrangement. A younger, sterner Alan stands beside his father, who formally introduces him to a diminutive Lady Leisha, the only daughter of Marquis Blanche. Alan's father outlines the path ahead. The following month, Alan will escort the prince, a duty that necessitates leaving the kingdom for several years. Despite this impending separation, the decree is absolute. Leisha will be his fiancée, regardless of the timeline. Alan accepts this logic, noting that she will come of age in 10 years, coinciding with his return. However, the weight of the demand presses on him. He is to join the Knights, leave his home for a decade, and sustain an engagement simultaneously. As the eldest son of House Quarks, he recognizes that his life's trajectory was predetermined from birth. He resigns himself to the role of captain of the Royal Guard upon his return, finding solace in the fact that Leisha can devote herself to bridal education in his absence. He stoically agrees to the arrangement, convinced that if his father deems it right, it must be so. The meeting moves to a more private setting, where the young Alan stares at Leisha, marveling at the tiny girl who is now his betrothed. He offers to have a maid bring tea, attempting to play the role of a gracious host. Leisha, however, breaks the formalities, asking him to recount the tales of the recent southern campaign. As they converse, she bluntly observes that he looked unhappy during the introduction of their engagement. She offers a radical solution. If he wishes, she can speak to her father to call off the engagement, confident that he would listen to her. Alan stares at her, bewildered by the audacity of this child who suggests dismantling a noble alliance so casually. Leisha presses on, her voice carrying a wisdom beyond her years. She tells him that he does not have to live his life merely obeying orders and that he possesses the right to choose his own desires. Alan recoils internally, dismissing her words initially as the naivety of a child who does not understand that arranged marriages cannot be simply refused. He wonders if he is the only one who feels the suffocating weight of force in this arrangement. Yet, Leisha beams at him, declaring that wanting something for oneself is precious. Provoked by her freedom, Alan posits a hypothetical rebellion. Perhaps he should abandon the engagement and the Knights entirely to live as he pleases. He admits that he always assumed he would follow his father's path to become captain. But as he voices the possibility of being a swordsman, an adventurer, or a musician, he realizes he does not actually mind the path laid out for him. Leisha's eyes sparkle with excitement as she asks what kind of man he will become, celebrating the vast world of possibilities before him. Back in the present, the adult Alan gazes down at Leisha, revealing that her declaration of freedom in that moment changed how he viewed the entire world. That was the precise instant he decided he would make her his fiancée, no matter the cost. He confesses that this obsession is the one thing he can never let go of. His expression intensifies, a dark conflict evident in his eyes as he confronts the paradox of their relationship. He demands to know why, if she claims to love him for being free, she is now trying to cage him by pushing him away. Silence stretches between them, heavy and fraught. Alan finally pulls back, his grip loosening, though his resolve remains ironclad. He asserts that he will not let her go. He instructs her to return to the hall once she has calmed down, apologizing for grabbing her too roughly, yet the apology does little to dampen the intensity of his claim. Alan exits the room, pausing at the door to cast a sharp look back at her. He asks a cryptic, piercing question. He wonders if she is some kind of monster in disguise. The door clicks shut, leaving Lisha alone with her turmoil. Lisha collapses emotionally, realizing her plan has backfired spectacularly. She worries that her earlier actions make it look like she led him on as a child, creating a deep-seated attachment she never intended. A black crow, referred to as Birdie, appears as her confidant. Lisha laments that making Lord Alan give up on her will be significantly harder than she anticipated. She shifts her focus to the official story, the scripted narrative of the world she inhabits. According to the plot, a ceremony involving the gathering of a rare flower is imminent. This flower blooms for only 1 week deep in a forest restricted to the chosen few. In the original scenario, the prince and Alan are destined to be poisoned by a monster during this quest. At that critical moment, the heroine, a shopkeeper's daughter, is supposed to appear and save them. Lisha determines that there is a branching route here, and she must ensure it leads to Alan falling for the heroine. Despite the bird's skepticism about her oscillating goals, reminding her she was trying to make him hate her just moments ago, Lisha commits to a new strategy. She decides to become the heroine's supporting cast, rationalizing that it would be better if Alan directed his overwhelming intensity towards someone else. She shudders, admitting that if his current focus on her continues, she will break. The scene shifts to the forest. Alan and the prince ride on horseback, the prince confirming that the flower should be just ahead. Hidden in the foliage, Lisha observes them, noting that the heroine has not yet arrived. She acknowledges the danger, knowing that poisonous monsters lurk nearby. She explains to the bird that she is waiting there to support the heroine and ensure. The girl ends up on Lord Alan's route, intervening only to prevent the heroine from getting too close to the prince instead. Suddenly, a bale tiger leaps from the shadows. Lisha identifies it instantly, noting its venomous claws and fangs. She watches with anticipation, noting that everything is proceeding according to the scenario. The beast lunges for the prince, who fails to dodge the initial strike. However, the script deviates. Alan steps in, shielding the prince and taking the hit. He then dispatches the monster with terrifying efficiency. Lisha watches from the bushes, stunned by his strength, realizing he was not supposed to escape so unharmed in the original story. The prince suffers a shallow wound, and this is the precise moment the heroine is supposed to emerge to heal them with medicinal herbs. The prince asks to see Alan's wound, fearing the poison has entered his system. Alan dismisses it as nothing serious, but the urgency mounts. Lisha scans the area frantically, realizing the heroine is nowhere to be found. The prince insists they must return to the castle immediately, but Alan worries about the ceremony. The prince counters that if the poison spreads, there will be no ceremony at all. Faced with the collapse of the plot, Lisha makes a desperate decision. She bursts from the bushes, feigning surprise and claiming she just happened to be passing by, an excuse she immediately recognizes as the worst imaginable. The prince and Alan stare at her in shock. Without hesitating, Lisha produces a medicinal herb, explaining that its sap completely neutralizes the bale tiger's poison. She acts surprised by the presence of the beast, maintaining her facade. The prince praises her knowledge and thanks her for saving them, his sincerity striking a blow to her guilty conscience. However, Alan's gaze is piercing. He asks why she is there, his suspicion palpable. Internally, Lisha screams at the absent heroine for forcing her to steal the spotlight and ruin the event meant to bring Alan and the protagonist together. Deep in the forest, Lisha retrieves a set of brewing tools from her bag, suggesting to her companions that they should brew some medicine to be safe. Alan observes her actions, noting that while his magic covered the immediate first aid, extra precautions are wise. He stares at her supplies, genuinely amazed. He comments that she is awfully prepared for someone who claimed to be just passing by, specifically pointing out the dedicated medicine-making tools she produced. Lisha flinches, her body jolting at his sharp observation. Desperate to cover her tracks, Lisha turns away, sweating nervously as she lies that she only recently got hooked on the hobby. She stammers that she has been dabbling in herbal medicine lately. Alan accepts the explanation, simply remarking that this interest is new to him. Internally, Lisha panics, realizing that in the original game script, the party travels to the heroine's house at this exact moment. She glances toward the path, knowing that the heroine's home is where the medicine is supposed to be crafted. She feels a sense of helplessness, acknowledging there is nothing more she can do in the forest. Suddenly, a voice calls out from the trees, announcing an arrival. A figure approaches, asking if someone is suffering from poison. The stranger pauses, claiming to know a little about medicine and offering to help. Emerging from the foliage, a woman and a young girl appear. Alan immediately apologizes, bowing his head as he realizes they have trespassed on sacred ground. The woman informs him that only the royal family and their attendants are permitted here, demanding to know who they are. Lisha stares intently at the small girl hiding behind the woman's dress, trying to deduce if this child is the game's heroine. The woman introduces the child as Azumi and gently nudges her forward, urging her to say hello. The woman explains that she only came out to the forest because her daughter insisted. A game interface flashes in Lisha's mind, displaying the character creation screen where the default name, Azumi, appears if no player name is entered. The system prompts for the heroine's name, confirming to Lisha that this girl is indeed the official heroine. Lisha processes the reality that the protagonist is a girl called Azumi. Lisha's internal monologue screams in confusion, questioning why the heroine is a mere child. Outside of her mental crisis, the conversation continues as the woman notes that Lady Lisha has already treated the group. However, Alan intervenes, insisting that if the locals know what they are doing, they should take a look. He argues that poison could still remain in their systems. Another companion, seeing Alan's rigidity, tells him to relax and not get so tense. He acknowledges Lisha's first aid but suggests extra care is harmless. Alan nods, conceding that a simple draft should flush out any remnants of the toxin. The young Azumi looks up at her mother, piping up that they can make the medicine at their home. Alan turns to Lisha, ordering her to accompany His Highness back to the castle immediately. He informs them that he has stationed men at the forest entrance for security. Lisha protests, stammering at the dismissal, but Alan declares he will retrieve the medicine himself. As the carriage prepares to depart with a clatter of wheels, Lisha refuses to be left behind. She grips her dress, shouting with intense determination that she will go too. Her sudden outburst startles the others, and she quickly adds that she is coming as well. Alan, resigned to her stubbornness, turns to the local woman and asks if her home is nearby. The woman points just up ahead, confirming the short distance. Walking toward the house, Lisha staggers slightly, feigning frailty. Azumi walks beside her, thanking her and stating she is happy to help. A black crow perched on Lisha's shoulder whispers to her, and Lisha realizes the bird knew about the heroine's age. She demands to know why the heroine is a kid. The crow retorts that telling her sooner wouldn't have changed anything. Lisha groans in frustration. She calculates that if they wait 10 years, the girl will be the right age. The crow shuts this down immediately, warning that the country will be destroyed by then if she stalls for 10 years. The bird admonishes her to stop relying on the heroine and stick to her role as the villainess. Reaching the destination, Lisha waves off assistance, claiming she is fine. The woman asks if Lisha is all right and offers to call the carriage. Lisha declines, stating she is tired and would like to rest for a bit. Alan decides to wait outside and asks to be called when the medicine is ready. Lisha recalls that in Alan's specific route in the game, the characters stayed here for tea. Inside the house, the sound of coughing and clinking cups fills the room. The crow complains that the environment is too loud. Lisha observes the hospitality scene playing out before her, recognizing it perfectly from her memories of the game. The woman brings a tray, inviting everyone to make themselves comfortable. The crow grumbles, reminding Lisha that this deviation is exactly why he told her to return with the prince. Azumi smiles brightly, her face radiating innocence as she chirps, "You're welcome." Lisha clutches her chest, her heart throbbing at the sheer cuteness of the girl. She admits internally that the child is adorable. Lisha confirms once more that this is really the heroine. She compliments Azumi aloud, calling her sweet. The crow, observing Lisha's melting expression, warns her that this softness is her weakness. He cautions her that her villainous mask is slipping. Lisha recoils, gasping as she argues that she cannot play the villain against a literal child. Suddenly, the mood shifts as Alan enters the frame, standing near Lisha and Azumi. The mother clasps her hands together, commenting that seeing them like this makes them look just like a parent and child. Alan blushes, looking away bashfully as he agrees that they apparently look good together, like a real family. Lisha's face flushes with horror and embarrassment. She screams internally that this is bad and she hates where this plot is going. She yells at Alan not to get carried away. In the apothecary room, shelves lined with jars surround them. Alan leans in, teasingly asking if Lisha is embarrassed. Lisha snaps back, denying it vehemently. She shouts that any man and woman with a child between them would look like a family, dismissing the romantic implication entirely. Azumi interrupts the bickering, asking for assistance reaching herbs on the top shelf. Alan immediately steps forward, offering to help Miss Azumi. Lisha, feeling that Alan is toying with her again, cuts in and declares she will handle it. She offers to give a hand since Azumi is making medicine. Lisha reaches up and retrieves 2 specific bottles. She hands them down to Azumi, asking if these are the 2 she wanted. Azumi stares at the bottles in shock, letting out a confused sound. She looks from the bottles to Lisha, noting that Lisha picked them perfectly. Azumi's eyes widen in realization. She states plainly that she never told Lisha which herbs to grab. Azumi continues her scrutiny, explaining that her papa makes these specific vials himself. Because of this unique origin, she didn't think anyone else would possess or recognize one. Lisha sweats profusely, realizing she messed up. She quickly lies, claiming she saw the same kind at her home and thought they looked familiar. Internally, she curses, realizing she recognized the item from the game without a second thought. Desperate to escape the interrogation, Lisha announces she needs something else from another room. She asks Azumi to come with her to get it. Walking away, she laments that her behavior now makes her look creepy rather than villainous. Azumi agrees to follow, though she looks skeptical. The mother calls out, warning Azumi not to be a bother to Lady Lisha. Lisha leads the way down the hall, asking vaguely about what they needed. Azumi follows, noting that the room they just left should have had everything needed for the medicine. Lisha observes the environment, noting it is exactly the same room as depicted in the game. Once they are alone in the corridor, the atmosphere changes instantly. Azumi stops walking, the sound of her footsteps ceasing. She declares with conviction that there is no way Lisha is just an NPC. She admits she briefly considered that Lisha might just be an idiot, but the knowledge of the recipe proves otherwise. She asserts that only a player would know that recipe. Azumi looks Lisha dead in the eyes, asking if she is reincarnated too. Lisha is stunned, asking, "You too?" in disbelief. Azumi confesses that even she freaked out when her memories came back. Lisha looks at the small girl, trying to reconcile this veteran player persona with the child's body. She asks if Azumi is really like her. Azumi snaps back, asking how she should know. Lisha stares, baffled as to why a normal person would catch on so quickly, but then pivots to the most pressing question: why is Azumi still a child? Lisha waves her hand dismissively, stating that is beside the point. She accuses Azumi of completely derailing the story. Azumi explains that she tried some fruit wine when she was 6 years old just because she was curious. She reveals that her memories came back during what she thought was the coming-of-age ceremony, but the trigger was the alcohol. Lisha realizes the fruit wine was the specific trigger event. She scolds Azumi, shouting that she wasn't supposed to drink that yet and asking if she really drank the fruit wine. Azumi yells back, asking what Lisha is doing acting like this when she is supposed to be the villain. Lisha points aggressively out the window toward Alan. She rants that they have finally reached the start of the main game, and yet here is Lady Lisha, someone who shouldn't even be present in this scene. She screams that she has never seen this happen on any route. She points to Alan, who is looking at her with hearts in his eyes. She describes Alan being crazy about Lisha as literally the absolute worst-case scenario. Azumi looks at Lisha with a serious expression, saying, "Obviously." She asks if Lisha is actually a pretty hardcore player. Lisha pauses, then confirms she cleared every route and collected every skill. She explains the dire stakes. They say if she ends up with Lord Alan, the country falls. She laments that the heroine she was counting on is still just a little kid, and she thought she was completely out of options. She notes with despair that Alan stubbornly refuses to hate her. Suddenly, Azumi grabs Lisha's hands tightly. The aura around the child shifts to that of a veteran gamer. Azumi declares fiercely that she is not quitting as the heroine just because she is a kid. She warns Lisha that if she gets in her way, she won't hold back. Lisha is taken aback by the sudden intensity. Azumi stares deeply into Lisha's eyes, telling her that she is exactly who she needed. Lisha, uncomfortable, asks her to let go of her hand. Azumi ignores the request and shouts, "Excuse me?" Outside, Alan wonders what is taking so long, urging Lisha to hurry up and come back. Inside, Azumi completely drops her pride and begs Lisha for a favor. She pleads with Lisha to help her make Lord Alan hate her, Azumi. Lisha stands there, confused and overwhelmed by the twist in their dynamic.